They told Eloan Ashford she should be grateful. Grateful that a powerful man wanted her. Grateful that her family had secured her future. Grateful that she would not be cast aside like so many unwanted daughters. She stood in silk and lace, hands trembling, while men twice her age discussed her body like a bargaining chip. "She'll do," one of them said. "Quiet. Obedient. Unremarkable, but fertile." They did not lower their voices. They did not need to. Eloan lowered her eyes instead, swallowing the shame burning her throat. She had been raised to endure, to smile, to obey, even when her name was spoken like a sentence. That night, she was to be handed over to Lord Garrick Blackmore, a man known not for love, but for burying his wives before their graves had time to settle. And the one person she believed would save her? The man she loved. The man she trusted with her heart. He was laughing in the dark, trading her freedom for power. That was the moment Eloan ran. Barefoot into the night. Into the forest. Into a fate far more dangerous than the one she fled. Because before dawn, she would ask a stranger to marry her. And she would have no idea she was offering her life to the Alpha King himself. If you crave intense werewolf romance, powerful Alpha Kings, and women who rise from betrayal to rule beside destiny, then stay with me. This is Alpha King Tales. And this story will break your heart, before it shows you how it can rise again. Chapter 1. The Bride Who Ran. The night Eloan Ashford ran, the wind screamed as though it knew what she was stealing from fate. It tore through the Ashford estate with cold fury, rattling the tall windows of the manor and bending the old oak trees until their branches clawed at the sky. Clouds swallowed the moon in slow, bruised layers, and the gravel paths glistened with frost. It was the kind of night meant for endings, or beginnings born in blood. Eloan stood at the threshold of her bedchamber, breathing shallowly, her hand pressed against her ribs as though she could hold her heart in place. The room behind her looked exactly as it always had, polished wood floors, embroidered curtains, the faint scent of lavender her mother once favored. It should have felt safe. It did not. On the bed lay her wedding gown. Ivory silk. Long sleeves. High collar. Modest. Respectable. A shroud. By tomorrow evening, she would belong to Lord Garrick Blackmore. The thought sent a tremor through her body, sharp and uncontrollable. Eloan squeezed her eyes shut, but the images came anyway. She had never seen him touch a woman, never seen him smile with warmth. But she had seen his eyes linger too long. Had heard the whispers carried through halls and markets and servants' quarters. 3 wives. 3 funerals. Each quieter than the last. They were delicate, the servants said. They failed to please him, the nobles murmured. They did not survive his temper, the guards whispered after too much drink. Eloan had listened. She had always listened. And now she was to be the 4th. Her fingers curled into the fabric of her cloak, the rough wool biting into her skin. She had dressed simply, dark trousers beneath a long tunic, soft boots fit for running, her hair braided tight against her scalp. Nothing that would slow her. Nothing that would mark her as a bride. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, stern and final. This is settled. Blackmore has power. Influence. Protection. You will do your duty. Duty. It was a word Eloan had lived beneath all her life. Duty to her family. Duty to her name. Duty to obedience. But tonight, duty felt like a noose. She slipped from the room without a sound, easing the door shut with care. The corridor beyond lay dark, lit only by the faint glow of dying candles. Every step felt too loud. Every breath felt like betrayal. She passed the portrait gallery, the stern faces of Ashford's long dead staring down at her with painted judgment. Her mother's likeness hung at the far end, soft-eyed and pale. "I'm sorry," Eloan whispered as she passed. "I tried." Her mother had died when Eloan was 16. After that, the house had grown colder, quieter. Decisions were made without tenderness. The servants slept. Or pretended to. They would not stop her if they saw her. Not tonight. Not when they all knew what awaited her at dawn. Eloan reached the side entrance and pressed her palm against the wood. For a moment, fear rooted her in place. If she opened that door, there would be no turning back. But if she stayed, her stomach twisted. She pulled the door open and stepped into the night. Cold air slammed into her lungs, stealing her breath. She staggered, then forced herself forward, down the stone steps and onto the narrow path that led away from the manor and into the trees beyond. The forest loomed like a wall of shadows, thick and ancient. She did not hesitate. Eloan ran. Her boots struck dirt and fallen leaves, her breath tearing in and out of her chest as branches scratched at her cloak. The wind roared in her ears, carrying with it the distant howl of wolves, far off, but close enough to raise the hairs along her arms. She had never run this far before. Never dared. Ladies did not flee into forests at night. Ladies waited to be rescued. But no one was coming for her. Except Rowan. The thought steadied her steps. Rowan Hale. With his warm smile and gentle voice. Rowan, who had held her hands beneath the old willow when they were younger, who had sworn he would never let harm come to her. Rowan, who had whispered promises into her hair when she cried over her mother's grave. "I'll take you away," he had said. "When the time comes, I swear it." That time was now. She pushed harder, ignoring the burn in her legs and the ache in her lungs. The forest path curved downward toward the river clearing where Rowan said he would wait. He had sent word earlier that evening, short, hurried, but full of urgency. "Tonight. After dark. Don't bring anyone." Her heart had leapt at the message. Fear had clawed at her, yes, but hope had followed close behind. He would help her. He had to. Eloan stumbled once, catching herself on a tree trunk slick with frost. Her hands shook as she forced herself onward. She could not think of tomorrow. Could not think of the wedding guests, the vows, the ring sliding onto her finger like a manacle. Only Rowan. Only escape. The clearing came into view at last, pale under the thin wash of moonlight. The river whispered nearby, dark and restless. Eloan slowed, her breath ragged, her pulse racing in her ears. She did not see him at first. Relief faltered. Then she heard voices. Male voices. Her steps slowed to a stop at the edge of the trees. She leaned against the rough bark of an oak, heart pounding, and listened. "You're sure she'll come?" Rowan's voice. Eloan's chest loosened, just a little. He was here. He had kept his word. "Of course she will," Rowan replied, a laugh curling through his tone. "The poor thing's terrified. She always was." Another man snorted. "You really think Blackmore will pay that much for her?" Eloan frowned. "Pay?" Rowan scoffed. "He'll pay whatever I ask. An untouched Ashford bride on the eve of the wedding? He'll see it as a gift." The word struck her like a slap. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows, breath shallow, ears straining. "You're cruel," the other man said, though there was amusement in his voice. "Letting her believe you were going to save her." Rowan laughed again. Louder this time. "Oh, she needed to believe something," he said easily. "Hope keeps people obedient. Makes them predictable." Eloan's fingers curled against the bark, nails biting into her skin. "Predictable? I almost feel bad," the man added. "She's always been sweet. Soft." Rowan made a dismissive sound. "Sweet doesn't survive. Useful does." Useful. The word echoed in Eloan's skull, sharp and hollow. The other man hesitated. "She loves you, you know." Rowan sighed, as though inconvenienced. "That was never my fault. I never promised her love. Just escape." Eloan's vision blurred. "I did promise to take her away," Rowan continued, his voice light. "I just didn't say where." A low chuckle followed. "Blackmore will be pleased," the man said. "And you'll be richer." "And well-connected," Rowan added. "You don't refuse a man like Garrick Blackmore. You profit from him." The night seemed to tilt. Eloan felt as though she was sinking into the earth, her body suddenly too heavy, her legs trembling beneath her. Every memory of Rowan, the gentle smiles, the whispered reassurances, the way he held her when she cried, shattered into fragments. All of it had been calculated. All of it had been a lie. She clamped a hand over her mouth as a sob threatened to escape. Her chest burned, each breath shallow and painful. If she made a sound, they would find her. They would drag her forward, smiling, triumphant. She forced herself to remain still. Rowan's voice drifted on, careless now. Honestly, she should be grateful. Blackmore will give her a title. Security. Better than wasting away here, dreaming of fairy tales. Something inside her broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. It broke quietly, like ice beneath a footstep. Eloan leaned back from the tree, her movements slow and deliberate despite the scream rising in her chest. She turned away from the clearing, away from the voices that had once been her lifeline. She did not run. Not yet. She walked, one careful step at a time, back into the forest. Her body moved on instinct, guiding her deeper into shadow, farther from the river, farther from everything she had known. Her hands shook violently now, but she did not stop. Tears slid down her cheeks, hot against the cold air, but she did not wipe them away. There was no point. She had run from one cage straight into another. Except now, there was no illusion left. No home. No lover. No savior. Only the night. The forest grew thicker as she moved, the trees crowding close, their branches interlacing overhead until the moon disappeared entirely. Darkness wrapped around her like a living thing. Every sound seemed louder here, the snap of twigs, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of some unseen creature. Her breath came unevenly. Each step felt heavier than the last. Think, she told herself desperately. You have to think. If she went back, her father would have her locked away until morning. She would be delivered to Blackmore in chains if necessary. If she stayed near the estate, Rowan would find her. He would smile. He would lie. There was no safe direction. Eloan stumbled again, this time falling to her knees. The impact jarred her bones, pain shooting through her legs. She barely felt it. She pressed her forehead to the cold earth and gasped, her composure finally shattering. A sob tore from her throat, raw and broken. I trusted you, she whispered into the dirt, though she did not know who she spoke to anymore. Rowan. Her father. Fate itself. The forest did not answer. The wind shifted. Eloan froze. Slowly, she lifted her head. The air felt different. Heavier. Charged. The sounds of the forest, crickets, rustling leaves, distant calls, had gone eerily quiet, as though something had stilled them. Her skin prickled, a deep, instinctive awareness crawling up her spine. She was not alone. Eloan rose unsteadily to her feet, heart hammering. She turned in a slow circle, peering into the darkness. The trees loomed close, their trunks thick and black. Shadows pooled between them, deep and watchful. Hello? Her voice shook despite her effort to steady it. No answer came. But the feeling remained. Eyes on her. Not human eyes. She swallowed hard, fear coiling tight in her chest. Stories flooded her mind, old tales whispered by servants, warnings spoken in half-jest. Of wolves that were more than wolves. Of kings who ruled the night. Of forests that belonged to things older and more dangerous than men. She had never believed them. Now, belief felt irrelevant. Eloan took a step back. A branch snapped somewhere to her left. She spun toward the sound, breath hitching. Her heart raced so hard it hurt. Please, she whispered, the word torn from her without thought. I don't have anything left. The darkness did not move. But it watched. She could feel it in her bones. Eloan backed away slowly, then turned and walked again, her steps uneven, her strength fading. She did not know where she was going anymore. The forest had swallowed all sense of direction. Time stretched, elastic and strange. At some point, her legs began to tremble uncontrollably. The cold seeped through her clothes, numbing her fingers and toes. Exhaustion weighed on her shoulders like lead. She stopped at last, leaning against a massive tree, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her mind reeled, torn between terror and despair. Tomorrow. By tomorrow, they would come for her. Her father. Blackmore's men. Rowan. She imagined iron hands closing around her arms. The carriage door slamming shut. Blackmore's smile. A sob escaped her, broken and hoarse. There's nowhere left, she murmured. The words fell into the night and lingered there, heavy and final. Somewhere in the darkness, something listened. Something ancient. Something patient. Eloan slid down the trunk of the tree until she sat on the cold ground, pulling her cloak tighter around herself. She stared into the shadows, tears streaking her face, her hope bled dry. She had one night before the world dragged her back. And for the first time in her life, Eloan Ashford truly understood what it meant to be alone. The forest breathed around her. And unseen eyes watched, waiting. Chapter TWO, A Stranger in the Dark. The forest breathed around her. And unseen eyes watched, waiting. Eloan did not know how long she sat there, pressed against the ancient tree, knees drawn to her chest, listening to the blood thunder in her ears. Time had loosened its grip, stretching thin and strange. The cold crept deeper into her bones, numbing her fingers, stiffening her legs, but she welcomed it. The cold was simpler than fear. It was easier than thinking. She told herself to stand. She did not. The night felt too close. Too aware. The sense of being watched did not fade. It sharpened. Eloan lifted her head slowly. The darkness ahead of her seemed thicker than the rest. The shadows layered upon shadows, as though the forest itself were holding its breath. Her heart stumbled in her chest. She strained to hear anything, but the silence pressed down, heavy and unnatural. Then it happened. A sound behind her. Not loud. Not careless. A footstep. Eloan gasped and surged to her feet, panic slicing through exhaustion. She spun around and ran. Branches whipped at her face as she stumbled blindly through the trees, breath tearing in and out of her lungs. Her thoughts fractured, scattered by fear. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she could not stop. The forest seemed to close around her, roots snaring her boots, shadows lunging at the edge of her vision. She pushed harder, heart screaming, lungs burning. And then, she collided with something solid. A body. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. Eloan cried out as strong hands caught her shoulders, stopping her from falling backward. She froze instantly, terror locking her muscles as she looked up. The man stood perfectly still. Tall, far taller than her. Broad-shouldered, his presence filling the narrow space between the trees. He wore dark clothing that blended seamlessly with the night, as though he had stepped out of it rather than into it. The hood of his cloak was lowered, revealing sharp features carved in shadow and moonlight. His eyes met hers. Silver. Not pale gray. Not light blue. Silver, bright and molten, catching the faintest trace of moonlight like metal heated in fire. Eloan's breath hitched painfully. The forest seemed to still around them. Even the wind fell quiet, as if the world itself had paused to watch. Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, trying again. I'm sorry. I didn't see you. The man did not answer. His grip on her shoulders was firm but not crushing. Not rough. Not gentle either. Simply, absolute. As though he could hold her there forever if he chose. She became acutely aware of how close he was. Of the heat radiating from him despite the cold night. Of the way his gaze never wavered from her face, sharp and assessing. Fear and something else tangled in her chest. Danger. Not the crude, grasping danger of men like Blackmore. Not the oily deception of Rowan. This was different. Controlled. Silent. Like a blade at rest. Eloan's heart hammered. She should pull away. She should scream. She did neither. I didn't mean to run into you, she whispered, the words tumbling out breathless and raw. I'm lost. The man's eyes flickered, just once, as though something ancient stirred behind them. Running, he said. His voice was low. Calm. Each word deliberate. It was not a question. Eloan nodded, her throat too tight to speak. From whom? He asked. The simple question broke something open inside her. I can't. Her voice failed her completely this time. She shook her head, tears blurring her vision. I don't have time. The man's gaze sharpened further, if that was possible. His hands loosened slightly, enough that she could pull away if she wished. She did not. The night pressed in on them, heavy and waiting. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled, long and low, a sound that raised gooseflesh along her arms. Eloan realized, dimly, that this stranger did not react to it at all. "Please," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop it. "I don't know where else to go." Something shifted in his expression then. Not softness. Not pity. Recognition. He studied her more closely now, his gaze tracing the tear tracks on her face, the way her cloak hung loose over trembling shoulders, the dirt smeared along her trousers where she had fallen. He inhaled slowly, deeply, as though scent told him what sight could not. "You're afraid," he said. It was not an accusation. Eloan laughed weakly, the sound brittle. "Yes." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The forest seemed to lean closer. "What is your name?" he asked. She hesitated. Names had power. Her father had always said so. Giving it to a stranger in the dark felt reckless. But then, everything about tonight was reckless. "Eloan," she said softly. "Eloan Ashford." The effect was immediate. His eyes darkened, the silver deepening like stormlit steel. "Ashford," he repeated. The way he said it made her skin prickle. "You know it?" she asked, uncertain. "I know of it," he replied. That was all he offered. Eloan swallowed. "And you?" A pause. "Kael," he said at last. "Kael Thorne." The name settled into the air between them, heavy and resonant. It sounded old. Dangerous. Like something whispered in stories meant to warn children into obedience. Kael released her shoulders fully then, stepping back just enough to give her space. The loss of his warmth made the cold rush in all at once. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said. A bitter smile twisted her lips. "Neither should you." His mouth curved faintly, not quite a smile. "I am exactly where I should be." She hugged her arms around herself, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had driven her this far was bleeding away, leaving only bone-deep weariness. "I don't have much time," she said, the words spilling out faster now, as if afraid they might disappear if she stopped speaking. "By morning, they'll come for me." "Who?" Kael asked. "My family," she said. "And the man they sold me to." His gaze hardened. "Sold?" he repeated. Eloan nodded, her chest tightening. "Lord Garrick Blackmore. The marriage is tomorrow. Tonight was my only chance to run." Kael said nothing. She pressed on, desperation sharpening her voice. I believed, someone would help me. But I was wrong. There's no one left." She looked up at him then, really looked, searching his face for any sign of mockery or judgment. She found none. Only stillness. "I can't go back," she whispered fiercely. "I won't." Silence stretched. The forest remained unnaturally quiet, as though every living thing were listening. Kael's eyes never left her face. "Blackmore is not a man one escapes easily." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm asking you." The words hung there, fragile and terrifying. Asking him what? She barely understood it herself until the truth surged up, unstoppable, carried on the tide of panic and resolve that had driven her this far. "I need a husband by tomorrow." The sentence fell from her lips like a confession. Kael did not react. Eloan rushed on, breathless now, heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. "It's the only way. If I'm married, legally, publicly, my father can't hand me over. Blackmore won't risk the scandal. He values his reputation too much." She laughed shakily. "Strange, isn't it? The law protects a wife better than a daughter." Kael's jaw tightened. "I don't care who," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't care what you want in return. Coin. Land. My name. My future. I will give you anything." She reached into her cloak with trembling fingers and pulled free a small leather pouch, holding it out to him with both hands. "It's not much," she said quickly. "But it's all I have on me. And my family has wealth. Influence. If you marry me, you gain that. I swear it." Kael's gaze dropped to the pouch, then lifted back to her face. Slowly, deliberately, he took it from her hand. Her heart leapt, wild and fragile. But he did not open it. He weighed it once in his palm, then closed his fingers around it and slipped it back into her grasp. "I do not need your money," he said. Her hope faltered. Then, "I do not need your name," he continued, "nor your land." Her hands shook as she lowered the pouch. "Then what do you want?" Kael studied her again, more intently than before, as though he were looking beyond her fear, beyond her desperation, into something deeper. "I want to understand," he said, "why you came to me." She frowned, confused. "Because you were here." He shook his head slightly. "There were other paths. Other directions you could have run." "I didn't know that," she said. "I was lost." "You are not," he replied quietly. The certainty in his voice made her breath catch. She looked away, unable to hold his gaze any longer. "I just know that if I stay alone, they'll find me. And if I go back," she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Kael's silence stretched, heavy and contemplative. Somewhere nearby, something shifted through the undergrowth, large and deliberate. Eloan stiffened, fear spiking in you. Kael noticed. "Do not be afraid," he said calmly. The words should not have soothed her. They did. "What are you?" she asked before she could stop herself. His eyes flicked to hers, sharp and unreadable. "A man," he said. It was not an answer. Eloan hugged herself tighter. "If you won't help me, just tell me now," she said, exhaustion seeping into every syllable. "I don't have the strength for false hope." Kael regarded her for a long moment. "You are offering yourself to a stranger," he said slowly. "Binding your fate to someone you do not know. Do you understand what that means?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "It means I live." Something like approval flickered across his face. "Very well," he said. Her heart stuttered. "You will marry me," Kael continued, his voice steady. "And in return, you will have my protection." The forest seemed to exhale. Eloan stared at him, scarcely daring to breathe. You mean it?" "I do not speak lightly," he replied. A laugh bubbled up in her chest, half sob, half disbelief. Relief crashed over her so hard her knees nearly buckled. "Thank you," she whispered fervently. "You won't regret this. I swear it." Kael's gaze sharpened once more, something dangerous glinting beneath the silver. "I already know that," he said. She frowned. "Know what?" "That this night will change more than you realize." A chill slid down her spine. "Kael," she said softly, "who are you?" For the first time since they met, his expression shifted fully into something guarded. "That," he said, "is not information you require tonight." Unease stirred in her chest, but she pushed it aside. Secrets were a small price to pay for survival. "When?" she asked. "The marriage." "Before dawn," he replied. Her breath caught. "That soon?" "Yes." "How?" Kael turned, gesturing for her to follow. "Come." She hesitated only a second before stepping after him. What choice did she have? As they moved deeper into the forest, Eloan became acutely aware of the way the night responded to him. Branches seemed to part more easily. Shadows shifted at his approach. The sense of being watched did not vanish, but it changed. It no longer felt like a threat. It felt like attention. "You're not afraid," she said quietly. "Of what?" he asked. "Of Blackmar," she replied. "Of my family." He glanced back at her then, silver eyes glinting. "No," he said simply. Something in his tone sent a strange shiver through her. They walked in silence for a time, the forest gradually thinning as the ground sloped downward. The air grew sharper, carrying the scent of pine and something wilder beneath it. Eloan's steps slowed as exhaustion finally caught up with her. Kael noticed immediately. He stopped. "You cannot collapse yet," he said. "I'm trying," she replied faintly. Without another word, he stepped closer and slipped an arm around her back, steadying her. The contact sent a jolt through her, heat flaring where his body touched hers. She stiffened, then relaxed reluctantly, leaning into his support. He was solid. Unyielding. Real. "You should know," she murmured, voice heavy with fatigue, "that I don't expect kindness. Just honesty." Kael looked down at her, his face unreadable in the dim light. "You will have both," he said. She closed her eyes briefly, letting herself believe it. They resumed walking. Somewhere deep in the forest, unseen and unchallenged, the Alpha King of Nightfall led his future queen forward, without revealing who, or what, he truly was. Chapter 3, Vows Spoken in Blood and Moonlight. Somewhere deep in the forest, unseen and unchallenged, the Alpha King of Nightfall led his future queen forward, without revealing who, or what, he truly was. Eloan followed him because she no longer had the strength to do anything else. The ground beneath her boots softened as they moved farther from the narrow paths she had known all her life. The forest changed. The trees grew taller, their trunks thicker, their bark etched with symbols she did not recognize. The air felt heavier, charged with something ancient and alive. Each breath carried the scent of pine, earth, and a wildness that stirred uneasily in her chest. She should have been afraid. Instead, she felt small, as though she had stepped into a place that had existed long before her fear, long before her name. Kael walked ahead of her, silent and sure-footed. His presence anchored her, even as it unsettled her. The night seemed to bend around him, shadows retreating from his path. Eloan noticed how the forest no longer pressed in threateningly. It watched, but with reverence rather than hunger. "How far?" she asked quietly. "Not far now," Kael replied. His voice carried differently here. Deeper. As though the forest itself listened when he spoke. Eloan hugged her cloak tighter around herself. Her thoughts raced, circling the same questions she had not dared to ask. Who was he, truly? What kind of man agreed to marry a stranger in the dark without hesitation, without bargaining? What kind of man inspired the forest to bow? They emerged into a clearing moments later. Eloan stopped short, breath catching in her throat. The trees parted to reveal a wide circle of pale stone, smooth and ancient, etched with symbols that glimmered faintly in the moonlight. At its center rose a massive slab of rock, flat-topped and dark, streaked with veins of silver that reflected the full moon overhead. The moon. It hung impossibly large above them, round and luminous, bathing the clearing in cold white light. Clouds had vanished entirely, leaving the sky bare and watching. Eloan felt the weight of the place settle on her shoulders. "What is this?" she whispered. "A binding ground," Kael answered. The word sent a tremor through her. "For wolves?" she asked hesitantly, recalling half-forgotten stories. "For those who rule them," he said. Her heart skipped. Before she could ask anything more, a sound rippled through the clearing. A low murmur. Eloan turned sharply. They were not alone. Shapes emerged from the shadows at the edge of the clearing. First one, then another, then dozens more. Men and women stepped forward silently, their movements fluid, their eyes catching the moonlight with an unnatural gleam. Wolves. Not shifted, standing on two legs, clothed, armed, but unmistakable all the same. Power radiated from them in waves that made Eloan's knees weaken. They formed a wide circle around the stone, all eyes fixed on Kael. Then, as one, they knelt. The sound of it was thunderous. Flesh and bone meeting stone and earth in perfect unison. Eloan gasped, staggering back a step. Kael did not react. He lifted his chin slightly, acknowledging them with a single glance. "My king," a voice murmured from the crowd. "King." The word struck Eloan like a blow. Her gaze flew to Kael, heart slamming against her ribs. He stood unchanged, still, calm, unyielding, but something about him shifted in that moment. The restraint she had sensed before loosened, just enough for something vast and terrifying to breathe beneath his skin. "You?" Her voice failed. She swallowed hard. "You're a..." Later, Kael said quietly, without looking at her. "Stand here." He guided her forward, positioning her beside the stone. His hand lingered briefly at her back, steady and warm. Eloan's mind reeled. A king. A wolf king. She had not married a man. She had offered herself, her name, her future, to something far more powerful than she had ever imagined. Fear surged, sharp and dizzying. "You said," she whispered urgently. "You said you were a man." "I am," Kael replied. "And more." The wolves watched in absolute silence. No one spoke. No one moved. The forest itself seemed to lean closer. Kael turned to face her fully for the first time since entering the clearing. The moonlight carved his features into something almost unreal, strong lines, sharp cheekbones, eyes burning silver and endless. "You may still walk away," he said calmly. "This bond cannot be forced." Her breath hitched. "If I walk away," she asked hoarsely, "what happens to me?" His gaze did not soften. But it did not harden either. "They will come for you," he said simply. "And I will not interfere." The truth of it settled like a stone in her chest. Eloan thought of Blackmore's hands. Rowan's laughter. Her father's cold finality. Then she thought of this moment. This place. This man, no, this king, who had not touched her without permission, who had offered protection before possession. Her hands curled into fists. "I don't want to walk away," she said. Something ancient flickered behind Kael's eyes. "Very well." He turned to the assembled wolves. "Witness," Kael commanded. The word rolled across the clearing like thunder. A woman stepped forward from the circle, tall, silver-haired, her presence heavy with authority. She carried a shallow blade carved from obsidian, its edge gleaming. "Eloan Ashford," the woman intoned, her voice resonant and clear. "Do you enter this bond of your own will?" Eloan's throat tightened. "Yes," she said. "Do you offer your name freely?" "Yes." "Do you accept the protection of the Alpha King of Nightfall?" Eloan hesitated only a heartbeat. "Yes." The woman nodded and turned to Kael. "Kael Thorne," she said. "Do you claim this woman as your wife?" "I do." "Do you swear her protection above your own ambition?" "I do." "Do you bind her fate to yours, before moon and blood?" "I do." The woman lifted the blade and extended it toward Eloan. "Your hand." Eloan's fingers trembled as she held out her palm. The blade was cold against her skin. She flinched as it bit, a sharp sting followed by warmth as blood welled up. She gasped softly. Kael took her hand without hesitation. The sight of his blood startled her more than her own. It was darker, thicker, glinting almost black-red in the moonlight. The woman pressed their palms together. Blood smeared. Heat flared. The air cracked. Eloan cried out as something surged through her. Power, warmth, a pulse that echoed her heartbeat but deeper, older. The ground beneath her feet seemed to tremble, the stone at the center glowing faintly as the symbols flared to life. The wolves bowed their heads. The forest bowed. Eloan swayed, overwhelmed. Kael caught her easily, his arm wrapping around her waist, holding her upright. His grip was firm but not claiming, steadying rather than restraining. "It is done," the woman said. The words echoed, final and irreversible. Eloan struggled to breathe. She felt different. Not bound in chains. Not trapped. Anchored. Her knees gave out, and Kael lowered her carefully to sit on the edge of the stone. "What did I just do?" she whispered, voice shaking. "You survived," he replied. She looked up at him, tears burning her eyes. "You're a king." "Yes." "You rule all of this," she said faintly, gesturing helplessly at the forest, the wolves, the night itself. "Yes." "And I," her voice broke. "I'm your wife." His gaze locked onto hers, intense and unreadable. "You are under my protection," he said firmly. "Nothing more will be asked of you tonight." Tonight. The word lingered. Eloan searched his face for hunger, for expectation. She found none. Instead, she saw restraint so absolute it frightened her more than desire ever could. "I won't touch you," Kael said, as if reading her thoughts. "Not unless you choose it. Not until you understand what this bond truly means." A sob tore from her chest, half relief, half shock. "Thank you," she whispered. Before he could respond, a sharp howl cut through the air. Not from within the circle. From beyond the forest. Every wolf stiffened. Kael straightened instantly, his body going taut. "They found us," someone murmured. Eloan's blood ran cold. "Who?" she asked, though she already knew. Kael's jaw tightened. "Blackmore." Torches flickered at the edge of the trees moments later. Harsh voices broke the sacred silence of the clearing, barking orders, cursing the darkness. Men stumbled into view, armed, armored, human. Fearless only because they did not understand where they stood. "There," one shouted. "She's there." Eloan's heart lurched. Kael stepped forward, placing himself squarely between her and the intruders. "You will kneel," he commanded. They laughed. "Out of the way," a man sneered. "That girl belongs to Lord Garrick Blackmore." The air changed. Kael moved. It was not a rush. Not a reckless charge. It was inevitability. He crossed the distance in a blink. The man's laughter cut off in a strangled cry as Kael struck him down with brutal precision. Bone cracked. Flesh tore. Blood sprayed across the stone. The forest roared. Wolves surged forward, shifting mid-motion, bodies twisting, snapping into massive forms of fur and fang. The night exploded into chaos, screams, snarls, steel clashing uselessly against claw and tooth. Eloan watched, frozen, as power unlike anything she had ever imagined tore through the clearing. Kael stood at the center of it all, untouched, unstoppable. A king in his true element. Men fell. Weapons shattered. Fear spread like wildfire. Within minutes, it was over. The survivors fled into the darkness, leaving blood and broken bodies behind. Silence returned. Eloan trembled violently. Kael turned back to her, his chest rising slowly, blood streaking his hands and cloak. His eyes still burned silver, fierce and alive. He knelt before her. "Eloan Ashford," he said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "Hear me." She swallowed hard, meeting his gaze. "From this moment on," he continued, "you are under my protection. Any who seek to claim you will answer to me." The wolves gathered behind him, forming a wall of fur and power. "I claim you as my Luna." The word echoed. Eloan's breath caught. Before she could speak, before she could decide whether she wanted the crown he placed before her, the forest howled its approval. And the world shifted beneath her feet. Chapter 4, The Alpha King's Wife. And the world shifted beneath her feet. Eloan did not remember leaving the clearing. Later, she would recall fragments, Kael lifting her into his arms as though she weighed nothing, the heat of his body cutting through the night's cold, the way the wolves parted before him in silent deference. She would remember the forest changing again, paths opening where none had been before, moonlight threading the darkness like silver veins. But in that moment, all she felt was the echo of the word still ringing in her ears. Luna. It followed her like a heartbeat she could not silence. When awareness returned fully, Eloan found herself standing at the edge of a vast stone terrace overlooking a valley shrouded in mist. Dawn hovered on the horizon, the sky bruised purple and gray, as if night and day were locked in a final struggle. Towers of dark stone rose from the valley floor, carved directly from the mountain itself, their surfaces etched with ancient runes that glowed faintly as she watched. Nightfall Realm. The name slid into her thoughts unbidden, as though the land itself had whispered it to her. She swayed, dizzy, and Kael's hand closed around her arm instantly. "Easy," he said quietly. The single word steadied her more than it should have. She looked at him then, really looked. He stood beside her clad now in a long black coat fastened with silver clasps, his dark hair pulled back at his nape. He appeared unchanged from the forest, yet everything about him felt sharper here, more complete. Like a blade returned to its sheath. "This is your realm," she said softly. "Our realm," he corrected. The words landed heavily. Below them, movement stirred. Wolves in human form crossed stone bridges and stairways, their steps purposeful, their glances lifting toward the terrace again and again. Some looked curious. Some wary. A few openly hostile. All of them watched her. Eloan drew in a slow breath. She had entered nightfall as a stranger. As a queen no one had chosen. A massive set of doors opened behind them with a deep, resonant sound. Warmth spilled out, along with torchlight and the low murmur of voices. "They are waiting," Kael said. "For what?" she asked. "For you." Her pulse spiked. "I don't know how to be this," she admitted quietly. "I don't know your customs. I don't know what they expect. Kael's gaze lingered on her face for a moment longer than necessary. They expect strength, he said. They will test you. Fear tightened her chest. And if I fail? His jaw set. You won't. It was not reassurance. It was certainty. They entered the hall together. The interior of the Nightfall Keep stole Eloan's breath. The ceiling arched high above them, supported by massive stone pillars carved with scenes of battles and coronations, wolves and kings, moons and blood. Long banners of deep blue and black hung from the walls, each bearing a sigil she did not yet understand but felt drawn to all the same. The hall fell silent as they stepped inside. Every eye turned toward her. Eloan felt the weight of those gazes press against her skin. She forced herself to lift her chin, to stand tall beside Kael despite the tremor in her limbs. Her heart hammered wildly, but she did not look away. Kael led her forward to a raised dais at the far end of the hall. He did not announce her. He did not explain. He simply took his seat on the stone throne carved in the shape of a wolf midrow, and stood beside it. Beside him. This is Eloan, Kael said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the vast space. My wife. A ripple passed through the assembled court. Whispers rose and fell like wind through grass. Human, someone murmured. Ashford, another hissed. She's not one of us. Eloan's fingers curled into the fabric of her sleeves. She had expected this. Prepared for it. Still, it stung. A tall man stepped forward from the crowd, his hair white as frost, his eyes a sharp amber. His presence radiated authority. You took a human bride without counsel, he said bluntly. Without challenge. Kael's expression did not change. I did. The bond was sealed, the man pressed. It was. A pause. Then she is Luna, the man said slowly. Whether we approve or not. More murmurs. The man's gaze shifted to Eloan, assessing and unflinching. Do you understand what it means to stand beside him? Eloan met his stare. It means I will not run, she said. Something flickered in his eyes, approval, perhaps. He inclined his head. Then welcome to Nightfall, Luna. The title echoed again, heavier than before. The court dispersed slowly after that, the tension never fully lifting. Eloan felt it follow her as Kael led her through winding corridors deeper into the keep. Servants bowed stiffly as she passed, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright suspicion. She did not miss the way Kael's attention never strayed far from her. He watched constantly. Every doorway. Every shadow. When they reached a quiet wing of the keep, Kael halted. This will be your chamber, he said, opening a heavy door. Eloan stepped inside and froze. The room was large, furnished simply but elegantly, dark wood, thick furs, a wide bed draped in midnight blue linens. A hearth crackled softly, casting warmth and flickering light across the stone walls. It was beautiful. And terrifying. You'll sleep here, Kael continued. I'll be nearby. Her heart stumbled. You're not, she hesitated. You're not staying? No. The word was firm. She searched his face, confusion tangling with something else she refused to name. Is that, because of me? Kael was silent for a moment. It is because of you, he said finally. But not in the way you fear. She did not know what to say to that. You are safe here, he continued. No one will enter this room without my permission. He turned to leave. Kael, she said softly. He paused, looking back. Thank you, she said. For last night. For everything. His gaze lingered on her for a long, charged moment. Rest, he said quietly. You will need your strength. When the door closed behind him, Eloan exhaled shakily and sank onto the edge of the bed. Only then did she realize how exhausted she truly was. Sleep took her quickly. She dreamed of wolves. Of running through moonlit forests, her feet light and strong, her lungs filled with cold, clean air. She dreamed of silver eyes watching her with something like devotion. She dreamed of warmth, deep and steady, wrapping around her, anchoring her against a storm. When she woke, her heart was racing. Sunlight filtered through the high windows, pale and wintry. For a moment, she did not know where she was. Then memory crashed back in, vivid and overwhelming. She was a queen. A Luna. The door opened softly. A young woman entered, her dark hair braided tightly, her movements careful. She bowed low. "My lady," she said. "I'm Myra. I'll attend you." Eloan nodded slowly. "Thank you." Myra hesitated, then added, "The court is curious." Eloan managed a faint smile. "I can imagine." As Myra helped her dress, simple garments in deep blues and grays, Eloan felt the weight of eyes on her even beyond the walls. She could sense them, like a pressure beneath her skin. When she stepped back into the halls, the testing began. Some wolves greeted her with respectful nods. Others ignored her entirely. A few brushed past her deliberately, shoulders clipping hers as though to test whether she would yield. She did not. She held her ground, chin lifted, heart pounding. Kael appeared at her side whenever the tension sharpened too much, his presence a silent warning. He did not speak on her behalf. He did not shield her from every slight. He let her stand. And she did. By the third day, whispers had spread. She doesn't cower. She doesn't snarl either. She watches. Eloan felt the bond more strongly with each passing hour. It was not a chain. It did not pull at her painfully. It warmed. When Kael was near, a steady heat settled in her chest, easing the constant edge of fear she had lived with for so long. When he was far, she felt hollow. The realization frightened her more than Blackmar ever had. At night, she lay awake in her bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, acutely aware of Kael's presence somewhere beyond the walls. She could feel him like a distant flame, steady and unyielding. He never came to her. He never touched her. But sometimes, when she passed him in the corridors, his hand would close briefly around her wrist, grounding her before releasing her again. Those moments left her breathless. By the end of the week, trouble reached the gates. The messenger arrived at dusk, blooded and shaking. Eloan watched from the edge of the hall as he knelt before Kael, dread pooling in her stomach. "Lord Garrick Blackmar demands the return of Eloan Ashford," the man said hoarsely. "He claims the marriage illegitimate. He threatens reprisal." A low growl rippled through the court. Kael rose slowly. "She is my wife," he said coldly. "Tell Blackmar he will receive nothing but silence." The messenger swallowed. "There's more." Kael's eyes narrowed. "Rowan Hale," the man continued. "He spreads word among the human lords that you abducted her. That she's a captive." Eloan's breath caught painfully. Rowan. Even here, he haunted her. Kael's hand curled into a fist. The stone beneath his feet cracked. "Leave us," he commanded. The court obeyed swiftly. When they were alone, Kael turned to Eloan, his expression unreadable. "They will use you against me," he said. "Against this realm." Her heart sank. "I don't want war," she whispered. "Nor do I," he replied. "But it may come regardless." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truth. Finally, Eloan spoke. "What am I to you, Kael?" He looked at her sharply. "You are my wife," he said. "My responsibility." "Only that?" she asked, her voice barely steady. Something flickered in his eyes then. Conflict, restraint, something dangerously close to longing. "There are bonds older than law," he said quietly. "And some, once claimed, cannot be undone without blood." Her breath hitched. "You think I'm," she hesitated, "your fated mate?" The word trembled between them. Kael did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was low and grave. "I fear you may be," he said. "And if I claim you fully, it will not be seen as a private act." Her pulse thundered. "It would be a declaration," he continued. "A challenge to every rival realm. A spark for war." Eloan's chest tightened. She looked at him, at the king who watched over her without touching her, who guarded her without owning her, who held a power vast enough to destroy kingdoms and yet restrained it for her sake. "I didn't mean to bring this to you," she whispered. Kael stepped closer, his presence enveloping her. "You did not bring it," he said softly. "Fate did. His hand hovered near her cheek, stopping just short of contact. And fate, he added, eyes burning silver, rarely asks permission. The truth of it settled between them like a storm waiting to break. Chapter 5. When Enemies Come for the Luna. The truth of it settled between them like a storm waiting to break. Nightfall did not fall quietly after that. The realm held its breath. Eloan felt it in the way the corridors echoed differently beneath her feet, in how the wolves' gazes sharpened when messengers came and went, in the tension coiling tight beneath the surface of every shared silence. Even the mountains seemed to lean closer, their jagged peaks dark against the sky like listening sentinels. War was coming. Not announced with banners or horns, but with unease, thick and creeping, impossible to ignore. Kael doubled the guards without explanation. Wolves patrolled the outer borders day and night, their scents riding the wind far beyond the stone walls. The gates remained closed. Fires burned along the battlements long after sunset. And still, Kael kept his distance. He spoke to Eloan every day. He ensured she was never alone. But he did not touch her. Not even when the bond between them hummed and pulled, warm and insistent, especially at night. Especially when fear woke her gasping from sleep. She would sit upright in bed, heart racing, and feel him, somewhere else in the keep, like a steady presence anchoring her to the world. Sometimes she wondered if he felt her too. She suspected he did. On the 7th night after the messenger's warning, the sky burned red. Eloan was standing near the narrow window of her chamber when she saw it, an unnatural glow on the horizon, staining the low clouds crimson. Her stomach dropped. Fire. The door burst open moments later, Myra rushing in, pale and breathless. "My lady," she said urgently. "The horns." They sounded then, deep and thunderous, shaking the stone beneath Eloan's feet. Attack. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she spun toward the door. "Where is the king?" Myra swallowed. "On the western wall." Without hesitation, Eloan gathered her skirts and ran. The halls erupted into chaos. Wolves sprinted past her, shifting mid-stride, armor clanging, weapons drawn. Orders rang out in sharp, clipped commands. The air smelled of smoke and iron. She reached the battlements just as the first arrows struck the outer walls. Below, torches dotted the dark like a field of burning stars. Men swarmed the valley floor, armored and relentless, banners snapping in the wind. Blackmar's sigil. Eloan's breath hitched painfully. "He came," she whispered. Kael stood at the edge of the wall, tall and unyielding, his gaze fixed on the enemy lines. The wind tugged at his cloak, revealing the lethal stillness in his posture. "They always do," he said. She moved to his side without thinking. "This is because of me." His head snapped toward her. "No. If I hadn't." He turned fully then, silver eyes blazing. "Enough." The force of his voice stilled her instantly. "They would have come eventually," he continued, more controlled now. "You are not the cause. You are the excuse." The horns sounded again, closer this time. A shout rose from below. "Send her out, Wolf King. Or watch your realm burn." Eloan's blood ran cold. Kael's jaw clenched. "You will not have her." Laughter echoed up from the valley. A familiar voice carried on the wind, smooth, mocking. "Eloan," it called. "Come willingly, and this ends quickly." Her knees nearly buckled. "Rowan." Kael felt it. She knew he did by the way his body went taut, by the low, dangerous sound that rumbled in his chest. "He's here," she whispered. "Yes," Kael said. "And he will regret it." The first wave hit the gates moments later. Steel clashed against stone. Fire rained down from the walls as wolves retaliated, arrows and boulders tearing through the ranks below. Eloan watched in horror as the valley erupted into chaos, men screaming, wolves charging, the night alive with violence. Kael turned to her abruptly. "You need to go below. Now." "I won't leave," she protested. "This is not a request," he said, gripping her shoulders. "They are here for you." "I trust you," she said fiercely. "And that," he replied grimly, "is why you must go." Before she could argue further, he signaled to two guards. "Take her to the inner chambers. Do not leave her side. Reluctantly, Eloan allowed herself to be pulled away, her gaze locked on Kael as long as possible. He had already turned back to the battlefield, issuing commands with ruthless precision. She did not see him shift. She did not see the moment his control began to fracture. The inner chambers lay deep within the mountain, shielded by layers of stone and magic. Eloan paced the narrow room, heart racing, the sounds of battle muffled but constant. Time stretched. Minutes blurred into hours. Then, the door opened. Relief surged, then died. Rowan stepped inside. He wore nightfall colors, his hair tied back, his expression twisted into something cold and triumphant. Eloan froze. How? Her voice failed. How did you get in here? He smiled. You'd be surprised how many doors open when you know what to promise. Betrayal burned through her, sharp and suffocating. You sold them out, she whispered. I traded information, Rowan corrected lightly. They wanted you. I wanted favor. You already betrayed me once, she said hoarsely. Wasn't that enough? He laughed softly. You always did take things too personally. Before she could move, hands seized her arms from behind. Wolves, or men, she could not tell in the chaos. Rowan stepped closer, his gaze crawling over her. Did you really think he married you for love? He asked mockingly. You're a symbol, Eloan. A weakness. And now, your leverage. She struggled, but the grip tightened painfully. Kael, she screamed. The sound was swallowed by the mountain. They dragged her through hidden passages, deeper and darker, until the air grew damp and cold. She was thrown into a stone cell, the door slamming shut with a final, echoing clang. Darkness closed in. Eloan slid down the wall, shaking violently. This time, there was no hope left to cling to. Only resolve. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the bond pulse weakly beneath her fear. Kael was alive. She knew it. Hold on, she thought desperately. Just a little longer. Above her, the battle turned. When Kael realized she was gone, something inside him snapped. Not gradually. Not carefully. It broke. The Alpha King's roar split the night, echoing across the valley with a force that made men fall to their knees. Wolves howled in answer, their eyes blazing as Kael leapt from the wall into the heart of the enemy. He did not fight like a man. He fought like a force of nature. Steel shattered against him. Fire died in his wake. He tore through Blackmore's ranks with merciless precision, claws and fangs and raw power unleashed at last. Not for a throne. Not for dominance. For her. The ground trembled beneath his fury. The sky itself seemed to recoil as Kael advanced, unstoppable, unstoppable, unstoppable. Blackmore's men fled screaming. But Rowan did not. He stood at the edge of the chaos, watching with widening eyes as the king carved a path straight toward him. Fear finally cracked his composure. Kael reached him in seconds. The sound Rowan made as Kael struck him down was short and final. The Alpha King did not slow. He followed her scent. Down, down, down into the mountain. Eloan lay curled on the cold stone, her wrists bound, her body aching. Blood trickled from a cut on her lip, metallic and warm. She tasted it and did not flinch. She was done running. When the door creaked open, she lifted her head. Kael stood in the doorway, eyes blazing, blood soaked into his clothes. Relief surged so hard it hurt. Then the floor collapsed beneath her feet. The cell lurched violently. Stone cracked. Magic flared. Kael shouted her name. She screamed as the world dropped away, darkness swallowing her whole. And then, nothing. Silence. When Kael reached the shattered cell moments later, there was no sign of her. Only blood. And broken stone. And the echo of her name torn from his throat, raw and devastating. For the first time in decades, the Alpha King of Nightfall knew fear. Because he was too late. Or so it seemed. Chapter 6, The Bond That Breaks the World. Darkness was not empty. Eloan learned that as she fell through it. It had weight. Texture. Pain. She became aware in fragments, of cold biting into her skin, of stone pressing hard against her spine, of breath that refused to come deep enough no matter how desperately she tried to draw it in. Each inhale burned. Each exhale rattled like it might be her last. Her body lay twisted amid rubble and broken rock, half buried where the floor of the old cell had collapsed into a forgotten cavern beneath the mountain. Jagged stone had torn through flesh and cloth alike. Blood soaked into the earth beneath her, warm at first, then frighteningly cold. She could not move her legs. She tried anyway. Agony ripped through her, white-hot and blinding. A sound tore from her throat, half scream, half sob, before she bit it back, tasting iron. I'm dying, she thought distantly. The realization came not with panic, but with a strange, aching calm. So this is how it ends. Her vision blurred. The cavern swam in and out of focus, shadows stretching like grasping hands. Somewhere far above, she thought she heard her name. Kael. The bond between them, thin and strained, flickered weakly in her chest, like an ember fighting to stay alive. I'm sorry, she tried to think toward him, unsure if the thought could reach. I chose you. I don't regret it. Her fingers twitched uselessly against the stone. Darkness pressed closer, heavier now, dragging her under. Kael tore through the collapsing tunnels like a creature possessed. The mountain groaned around him, ancient stone cracking and shifting as if recoiling from his rage. Wolves followed at a distance, but none dared come too close. The air around their king vibrated with lethal power, silver light bleeding from his eyes, his skin split with glowing sigils older than the realm itself. He felt her. Faint. Fading. No, he snarled, shoving aside a slab of rock that would have crushed a lesser being. No, hold on. The bond led him deeper, down into the bones of the mountain, into a cavern so old it predated nightfall itself. He skidded to a halt at the sight of her. Eloan lay broken amid the rubble, blood pooling beneath her, her chest rising in shallow, uneven breaths. Her skin was ashen, lips tinged blue. Something in Kael shattered completely. He was at her side in an instant, dropping to his knees, hands trembling as he gathered her into his arms. Eloan, he whispered hoarsely. Look at me. Her lashes fluttered weakly. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't open her eyes at all. Then she did. A faint smile curved her mouth, fragile as glass. You found me. I will always find you, he said fiercely, pressing his forehead to hers. Always. His hands glowed faintly as he poured power into her, ancient magic flowing from him into her shattered body. Bones knit. Wounds closed. But it wasn't enough. He felt it immediately, the resistance, the way her body rejected the healing, already too close to death to accept it. Her breath hitched. Blood welled again. Kael sucked in a sharp breath, terror clawing up his spine. No. Not like this. Not after everything. His mind raced, ancient knowledge surfacing whether he wanted it or not. There was a way. One final, forbidden way. A bond deeper than marriage. Deeper than oath. The mating bond. Not the ceremonial claiming of kings and queens. Not the symbolic joining used to appease courts. The true bond. Soul to soul. Life to life. It was outlawed for a reason. Once forged, it could not be undone. It tied their life forces together completely. Pain shared. Power shared. Fate shared. And if one died, the other would follow. The ancient laws echoed in his mind, cold and absolute. To bind a dying soul is to gamble the balance of the realms. To claim without consent is tyranny. To claim with consent is catastrophe. Eloan's eyes drifted shut again. Kael felt her slipping. He did not hesitate. Eloan, he said urgently, cupping her face. Listen to me. I can save you. But it will change everything. Her eyes opened, unfocused but trusting. Always trusting. I trust you, she whispered. The words hit him like a blade. This bond, it will bind you to me completely, he continued, voice shaking despite his iron will. My life. My power. My fate. You will be Luna not by crown, but by blood and soul. Her gaze steadied. The fear there faded, replaced by something fierce and clear. I choose you, she said. I always have. That was consent. That was everything. Kael lowered his head and bit into his palm, blood welling bright and silvered with power. He pressed his bleeding hand to her chest, directly over her heart. By blood and moon, he intoned, ancient words tearing from his throat, by fang and flame, by life and death, I claim you. The cavern shook violently. Eloan gasped as heat exploded through her body, pain and pleasure crashing together in a blinding surge. She arched against him, a scream ripping free as the bond ignited, silver light bursting from her chest to wrap around them both. Kael roared as the bond slammed into him, raw and overwhelming, her pain flooding his senses, her fear, her hope, her love. It was too much. The mountain screamed. Magic rippled outward like a shockwave, racing through nightfall and beyond, through ley lines and ancient borders, through realms that had not felt such power awaken in centuries. Wolves across the realm dropped to their knees, howling as the alpha bond flared, strengthened tenfold. Kings woke in their beds with blood on their lips. Seers cried out in terror. The world felt it. Eloan convulsed once, then went still. For a heartbeat, Kael thought he had failed. Then she breathed. Deep. Steady. Her wounds sealed completely, skin glowing faintly where the bond mark formed over her heart, a crescent moon entwined with a thorned crown. Kael sagged, crushing her against him, relief crashing through him so violently he nearly wept. You live, he whispered. You live. Hours later, Eloan awoke. She did not wake in pain. She woke in warmth. Strength pulsed through her veins, unfamiliar and intoxicating. Her senses felt sharpened, she could hear water dripping far away, smell the stone and Kael's blood and the faint ozone of magic lingering in the air. And she could feel him. Not just nearby. Within her. She sat up slowly, marveling at the way her body responded, whole, unbroken, powerful. Kael knelt a short distance away, head bowed, shoulders rigid with restraint. You're awake, he said quietly. I feel different, she said, pressing a hand to her chest. You are, he replied. You're bound to me now. Fully. She met his gaze without fear. You gave me a choice. That's all I ever wanted. Something in his expression cracked. Above them, footsteps echoed as wolves cautiously entered the cavern, stopping short when they felt the bond between their king and queen. Eloan rose to her feet, steady and strong. When she took Kael's hand, the world seemed to steady with them. Together, they emerged from the mountain. The remnants of Blackmaw's army scattered at the sight of them, of her glowing mark, of Kael's unleashed power now tempered by her presence. They stood side by side. Not king and wife, but equals. Later, when the healers finally dared approach, one old wolf bowed deeply, his voice trembling. The bond has a cost, he said softly. The ancient texts speak of it. Kael's grip tightened on Eloan's hand. What cost? She demanded. The wolf swallowed. The alpha who binds a dying mate, trades years of his own life to anchor hers. Silence fell like a blade. Eloan turned to Kael slowly. You didn't tell me, she said, voice breaking. I would do it again, he replied without hesitation. She pressed her forehead to his, tears burning her eyes. The world had been saved. But the bond that had done it might one day demand the Alpha King's life in return. And Eloan Ashford, once a bride who ran, swore silently. She would not let fate take him without a fight. Chapter 7, Queen of her own choosing. The mountain did not celebrate. It groaned. Stone shifted beneath Eloan's feet as dawn bled slowly into the sky, pale and cold. Smoke rose from the battlefield below the mountain pass, curling like a warning rather than a victory banner. The clash had ended, but the world still trembled with what had been unleashed the night before. Eloan stood at the edge of the broken ridge, her cloak snapping in the wind, the mark over her heart warm and alive beneath the fabric. The bond hummed steadily now, not painful, not overwhelming. Present. Constant. Kael was behind her, close enough that she could feel his breath when the wind stilled. Alive. That knowledge anchored her. Below them, nightfall wolves moved among the fallen, lifting the wounded, tending the dying. The enemy ranks had shattered at sunrise. Blackmaw's banners lay torn and trampled into the mud. His soldiers had fled or surrendered, their fear sharper than any blade. But the war was not finished. Not yet. Eloan. Kael's voice was quiet, roughened by exhaustion and something deeper. When she turned, she saw it in his eyes, silver dimmed to steel, power restrained by sheer will. They are bringing him, he said. Her fingers curled slowly at her sides. Lord Garrick Blackmore. The man she had been sold to. The man whose name had haunted her childhood like a shadow stretching toward her future. The man who had started this war believing she was still something to be owned. They will bring Rowan as well, Kael added. At that name, something cold settled in her chest. Rowan Hale. The boy she had loved. The man who had smiled at her while sharpening the knife for her back. She nodded once. Good. They descended the ridge together. The clearing below had been cleared of bodies and blood as much as possible, but the earth still bore the scars. Wolves stood in a wide circle, silent and watchful, eyes following Eloan as she stepped forward. Not just watching. Measuring. She felt it now, the way their attention shifted when she entered a space, the way their posture subtly changed. The bond had altered more than her body. It had marked her as something other. As something central. Kael did not lead her. He walked beside her. At the center of the clearing, two figures were forced to their knees. Blackmore looked smaller than she remembered. Still broad, still cruel in the cut of his mouth, but age clung to him now like rot. His armor was dented, his beard streaked with ash and blood. His eyes, once so certain of obedience, flicked toward her with disbelief. Rowan was worse. His fine clothes were torn, his hands bound behind his back. Dirt streaked his face where tears had cut through grime. He lifted his head when he saw her, hope flaring too quickly to be hidden. Eloan, he said hoarsely. Thank the gods, you're alive. She stopped a few paces away. The distance felt intentional. I am, she said. Her voice did not shake. Rowan's gaze darted to the mark at her chest, visible now through the torn neckline of her gown. His breath caught. You're his, he swallowed. You're the Luna? She did not answer him. Blackmore laughed instead. A low, rasping sound. So this is how it ends, he said. You playing queen among beasts. Something moved in the wolves at that word. Eloan stepped closer. Kael stiffened beside her, a warning thrumming through the bond. She felt his instinct rise, protect, destroy, end the threat. Trust me, she sent back, unsure how but knowing he would feel it. She stopped directly in front of Blackmore. You came for me, she said calmly. You burned villages. You killed my people and yours. You thought I was still yours to collect. Blackmore sneered. You were promised. I was sold, she corrected. There is a difference. He opened his mouth to reply. She did not let him. You will not speak again, Eloan said. Not because I fear your words, but because they no longer matter. She turned slightly. Kael. The Alpha King met her gaze. Yes, my queen. The words rippled through the clearing. Eloan did not look away from Blackmore. End him. Blackmore's eyes widened. You wouldn't dare. Kael moved. It was swift. Clean. Final. Power surged once, a crack of force that split the ground beneath Blackmore's knees. The man never finished his sentence. His body fell lifelessly to the earth, the cruelty that had defined him snuffed out without ceremony. No cheer followed. No howl. Only silence. Justice without cruelty. Eloan turned away. Rowan was shaking now. He fell forward onto his hands, chains clinking as he crawled a step toward her. Eloan, please, he begged. I didn't know it would go this far. I thought, if I gave him what he wanted, he'd leave us alone. I thought I was protecting you. She faced him fully now. By selling me? I loved you, he sobbed. I still do. She studied him for a long moment. She searched for the boy she had loved. The one who had promised to take her away, to build a life beyond fear. She found nothing. You loved what I gave you, she said softly. My trust. My silence. My obedience. She crouched before him, meeting his eyes. I will not kill you, she said. Hope flared again, desperate and ugly. But you will live, she continued, knowing what you are. She stood. Strip him of name and title. Banish him beyond the eastern border. Let him live as he made me live, without protection, without belonging. Rowan cried out her name as the wolves dragged him away. She did not turn. Strength without mercy. The circle slowly broke. Wolves bowed as Eloan passed, some awkwardly, some with reverence. She felt their acceptance settling, not as a command, but as a choice. By midday, the realm gathered. Not in a throne room, but in the open stone amphitheater carved into the mountainside, where Nightfall's alphas had ruled since the first howl split the sky. Ancient pillars rose around them, etched with stories of blood and bond and lore. Eloan stood at the center with Kael. He looked different. The power he carried was still vast, still terrifying, but it bore restraint now. Where once it had pressed outward, demanding submission, it curved inward toward her. Anchored. The elders approached, faces grave. The bond saved the realm, the oldest said. But it has altered the balance. Kael inclined his head. I know the cost. Eloan's fingers tightened in his. How long? She asked. The elder hesitated. Years, he said finally. Decades, perhaps. But the life you bound to yours, draws from you now. Kael turned to her. She shook her head before he could speak. Don't. This was my choice, he said. I do not regret it. Neither do I, she said fiercely. But I will not rule beside you while time steals you piece by piece. The elders exchanged looks. There may be another way, one said carefully. The bond is ancient. So are its exceptions. Eloan straightened. Then we will find them. That night, the realm gathered again. Torches lit the amphitheater. The wolves stood shoulder to shoulder, their voices hushed. Kael stepped forward. I have ruled you by strength, he said. By fear when necessary. By law when possible. But tonight, I kneel not as alpha, but as a mate. Gasps rippled outward. Before anyone could stop him, Kael Thorne knelt before Eloan Ashford. Shock froze her in place. Kael. I chose you, he said, voice carrying. Not because fate demanded it. Not because power required it. But because you stood where others broke. Because you chose justice when vengeance would have been easier. He bowed his head. I offer you the crown not as my possession, but as my equal. Eloan's heart thundered. She looked out over the realm. At the wolves who had watched her arrive as a stranger. At the mountains that had nearly claimed her life. She thought of the girl who had run barefoot into the night, believing she had nothing left. She lifted her chin. I did not come here to be saved, she said. I came here because I refused to be owned. She placed her hand over Kael's heart. I accept the crown, she continued, not because I am bound to it, but because I choose it. She helped him rise. The wolves dropped to their knees. All of them. The howl that followed shook the stars. Later, as the realm slept, Eloan stood on the balcony overlooking nightfall, the wind tugging at her hair. Kael joined her quietly. You are everything they need, he said. She smiled faintly. So are you. She leaned into him, feeling the bond steady and sure between them. She had not paid a stranger to save her. She had chosen a king. And in doing so, she had become one beside him. Eloan Ashford began this story as a girl who was sold. A daughter measured by her silence. A bride traded for power. A woman taught that endurance was the same as strength. But she learned the truth the hard way. Strength is not staying where you are broken. Love is not something that costs you your dignity. And fate does not reward obedience, it answers courage. Eloan did not survive because a king saved her. She survived because she chose herself when the world told her she was worth nothing more than a bargain. And when she reached for help in the darkness, she did not find safety. She found transformation. This is the lesson of her story. You are not defined by what you endure. You are defined by what you choose when endurance is no longer enough. Sometimes freedom demands a risk. Sometimes love demands a fire. And sometimes, the crown belongs not to the strongest, but to the one brave enough to claim it. If this story moved you, If you felt Eloin's fear, her rise, her power, then don't let the journey end here. Subscribe, like, and stay with Alpha King Tales for more addictive werewolf romance, alpha kings who kneel only to their queens, and stories where broken beginnings lead to unstoppable destinies. Until the next tale, may your heart be fierce, your choices be your own, and your fate answer your call.